All right, sorry about this. Not sure why we have no video. Let me go back into here. I can set this up. And then Lee, looks like you were on, but now I don't see you on. I was hoping you could start the facilitation that we could do maybe audio until I got this video piece figured out. Oh, here we go. Maybe try this. Let me try, I'm going to try, Alan, I'm going to remove you and see if I bring you on.
Okay.
Oh, no, no, never mind. Then it says I can't bring you back in. Make you co-host. I'm going to change your role to attendee, Alan, and now I'm going to try and invite you back in. So I added you back in, Alan. See if you can do your video now. I don't think that's going to fix our problem, but.
No.
Nope, you still cannot.
No.
Okay, let me see how many people I can make co-host and see if that fixes it. So are you able to do it now, Alan? Okay, so I wonder how many co-hosts we can have, because I'm going to make everyone a co-host, because then it appears you can turn on your video. I will have to look this one up. So as I make you co-hosts, you should be able to turn on your video. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Hello. I assume everyone can unmute themselves. It was just the video issue.
Correct.
It's that way.
Yep. All right. I'm working my way down the list here. Keep moving. Read. There you go, Read. Okay. Let me go back and make sure I caught everyone. Okay, it looks like I got everyone. So if everyone can add your video now. Apologies for that.
Looks like we have a few committee members in the attendees section.
Thank you. All right. They are in. Now I'll have to make them co-hosts so they can turn on their videos. Not sure what happened there, but get it figured out. This is actually the first time that I've run the Zoom webinar instead of a Zoom meeting. And okay, so everyone should be a co-host and able to turn on your video. So Nick and Andrea, there we go. You should be able to put on your video. Great, here we all are. That's better. Nick and Lee, your videos are off. If you want to, you can turn those on if you're able to. And then Lee, are you able to, now that I'm going to try and figure out this video piece. Not that it's a big deal, but Lee, will you be able to facilitate from this point?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to hand that over to you and go make sure some of the other technical pieces are taken live streaming. You want to
Shane,
do a little intro? Go ahead, Lee.
is there anything you want to say about the meeting coordination, how it's set up?
No, I think so. Most ATC members, this is the same setup as before. I just had someone else set this up for me last time, and so this is my first time setting it up and running it on my own. So obviously a little hitch there, but so you have the agenda. Lee's going to facilitate. We're going to run through as our normal ways. If there is anyone that in the attendee list, which doesn't look like we have many, and then also, yeah, if you are watching us on the YouTube live stream and you would like to make a public comment, you can do so by joining the Zoom webinar and then putting a question in the Q&A or raising your hand, and I will call on you and bring you in to talk. And if you're currently on YouTube watching, you can find the link on our Facebook page, or I will actually go put the link in the comment section. And since it's a little mixed up tonight, we can probably do some public comment at the end if there are people who would still like to make a public comment. And we're not, since this is something new that we're doing, if that's okay with everyone, that we can do a public comment at the end as well. Okay, that sound good? All right, great. I'll hand it back over to you, Lee.
Okay, the first item is approve the May 14th meeting notes.
Yeah, I would move to adopt them as, accept them as circulated.
Second.
So if anyone has concerns, they should voice that or make any changes. Okay, looks like motion passes. All right. Lee?
Okay, before we go on to our next item, I just want to add something. Reed brought this up today about in the last few years, we've canceled the July meeting. And so we should have a discussion if we want to meet virtually, if that's how we're going to meet next in July. So the first item is open streets update. And I think Cass and maybe Shane will do that.
Yeah, actually, I think I have Cass in the attendees section. I'm going to see if I can bring her in and see if she's able to, and if not, then I'll cover that portion. Let's see. So Cass, if you're interested and able to do this, that would be great, because I am still trying to figure out some of these back end pieces here that I want to get covered, or we can move on to another agenda item and I can talk about this after. But would you feel comfortable?
Shane, I can cover this. My video's not working, but audio seems to, so maybe we can go with that.
You know what? Let me fix that for you real quick here.
I'll get started.
There you go. Yep.
Okay.
You should be set.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be back again this month. And we, as many of you know, have been working on a program called Open Streets, which will be similar to the slow streets that are happening in Portland and the Stay Healthy streets that are happening in Bend and in many other cities around the country. What we're envisioning is a program that would set aside a small percentage of Eugene's streets where we would promote physical, mental, and economic health by making those streets available for exercise and bike ped travel. So we really want people to not only get out and get some fresh air, but also be able to get to their grocery store and go pick up some takeout for dinner. Because as we all know, getting your food or whatever it is you may need on foot or on bike is exercise, in addition to being lovely. So we are really excited about the program, and we are hoping to move it along. Internally, we are hitting some snags about making sure that the space is safe for everybody using it, and making sure that we have good barriers and signage up, and also that we are internally dealing with the liability issues that could arise in this situation. So things are in process right now, and we're working on it feverishly. We are hoping for a launch in this month, and we are identifying streets that are in in neighborhoods that are less well served by our Parks and Paths system. So we'll be, once we land on those streets, be internally talking with all the staff within Eugene that may be working on those streets in some various ways, make sure that they all sort of pass view by all of us, and then start talking to the neighborhood associations and other community groups to share the streets with them, to see whether we might need to make any adjustments. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. Nope.
I have a question. This seems like an opportunity for the infrastructure committee to potentially weigh in. And I know we haven't been meeting the last couple of months, but it does seem like something that might be of value.
Wonderful.
This is Josh. I just wanted to note that when the university was approached about this concept a couple of months ago, we were apprehensive because at the time we were very closed down. We're looking at opening back up, and so the city should come back to the university and ask again about our participation in this.
Thank you, Josh.
I had a question too about whether or not this would be inclusive at all of business district sort of sidewalk areas, like for example on Broadway, to allow restaurants to be able to expand out. I'm wondering if that's another part of this at all.
Well, you might have heard about the streeteries work that is being done, where restaurants can apply for a permit to be able to use some of the sidewalk space or some of the parking space outside of their restaurant. So that is in effect, and restaurants are already using that, slowly getting on that program. It is possible that there might be some open streets that are created, they're set up really just for restaurants, but would hopefully still have a walk and bike path through them. So that is something that we are kicking around, but I would say that most of these streets are in neighborhood areas. And in terms of getting people to businesses, grocery stores, restaurants, ice cream shops and all that fun stuff for the summertime, we are envisioning wayfinding, signage along the way to let people know, head this way for these parks and this way for these restaurants, and help people discover their neighborhoods in that way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion about whether this will be a trial for something that might be permanent in some locations?
Well, first of all, we have to see how this goes.
Sure.
We got to get this off the ground and see how it goes, and we'll be evaluating it and see where we are. You know, it would be wonderful if this turns out to be something that the community really wants, either every summer or in a longer term way. So, or in a year-round kind of a way. But yes, I would say that we've got our eyes on that, and we're focused right now on just getting the first streets up and launched.
How do you, this is Julie, how do you handle residents of the street, you know, getting in and out with their cars, assuming that they're driving a car?
Sure. Yes, and I didn't mention that part, Julie, so I'm really glad you asked that question. So in terms of accessing the streets, there will be a soft closure. And what we mean by that is that it's closed, the street would be closed to through traffic, but any residents who live on that street or their guests can drive carefully to and from their homes. Delivery trucks, emergency vehicles, garbage trucks, you know, the mail carrier can all get to where they need to go. We'll simply be asking everybody who has to use these streets that are in vehicles, and actually everybody. So anybody who's using the streets, to recognize that this is a shared space. And so treating it as a shared space, we need to watch each other and move through it a little bit more slowly. So there'll be a campaign around that will go along with the program.
I had a question. When we had talked about this in the program subcommittee a couple of months ago, the existing map for what the routes would be were such that it was more difficult to place them in more underserved areas by active transportation as it is. And I'm wondering if the routes have evolved or if it remains difficult to find closed safe loops in, say, West North Eugene.
So, you know, it is more challenging in some places, but that's not deterring us from finding some place to make it as safe as we can. And so we are finding streets in Bethel, and we are finding streets in Santa Clara, and you know, we are discussing, you know, how these things could work, but we're finding some great spaces to work with. And we are really looking for those spaces that don't have as much parks, you know, where people could not only get to restaurants like we talked about, but also get to the barbershop and the free school lunch location and different places like that. And so we're working on it.
I have a couple of questions. I appreciate that we're discussing kind of equitable locations for where these streets are going to be placed, and also that you mentioned having the streets be safe for all people, but particularly given the context of the past couple of weeks, I think it's being proven time and again that open space is not safe for all people right now in this country, particularly for Black communities. So I'd love to have more of a discussion about what actions the city could take to make sure that open streets are a safe place and not a space that is continuing to kind of perpetuate systems of oppression and injustice.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, that's a really important question right now and always. So what we're looking at is a space that is not necessarily policed. Like, we're not calling upon EPD to police these spaces. We are making these spaces available, and we'll be offering the good signage and good barriers and working to keep the spaces safe in that way without having to use EPD at all. So that's one way. And I would say in terms of equity in So there's the equity piece in terms of choosing the space. And I would say in terms of activating the space, what we've discussed is just simply not involving EPD. And if you have more ideas, I would definitely love to hear them. We're looking, as I said, to access school lunch sites and places that low-income families might need to get to, and really looking at where do we have multifamily housing. So I would say we've been focused on location.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The transportation kind of planner in me loves this concept, and I definitely don't not support it. Educate myself kind of on the more holistic view, and I don't have any suggestions at this time, but I will be looking into it further myself for my personal education.
Thanks. And if you find something, we're on the lookout for that. So you find something, please let me know.
Cass, a couple of things. I've worked the barricades on a few of the Sunday Streets events, and having done that, I know that frequently, even though they've been told often, neighbors or people who live in the neighborhood that's closed frequently come out and say, gee, this is the first time I've heard about it. And so it strikes me it's probably pretty important to look back at the history of some of the Sunday Streets, how these neighborhood notifications were made, and maybe think about ways to redouble that or really make a big advertising push so that people become pretty aware of it. And then the second thing is, I apologize if I missed it. Did you talk about the timeline for some of the soft openings that are coming?
I didn't. So I can talk about that. In terms of notifying the neighbors, as I said, we'll be working with the neighborhood associations and community groups, but then we'll also send a postcard to the residents, and there will be a lot of signage out. So it's not just that street closure signage, it's actually, this is an open street, this is what that means. Here's information to a phone number and an email address. You could contact us if you want more. The postcards will have, a map of the route that's available, the streets that are available locally in that neighborhood, and an invitation for neighbors to reach out to us if they have any questions. So that's that piece. And then in terms of the timeline, we are still working through some kinks internally. So I'm hoping that we will be launching in June, and that the program would go through the summer, and we'd be evaluating in mid-September. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I'm just curious if, obviously not much communication has gone out. I'm wondering what, if any, feedback, specifically negative feedback, has been received, and what you're anticipating in terms of, kind of to Steve's question about getting folks on board ahead of time.
So until we have internally worked through some of these pieces, we're not going to be advertising. So we need to work through those pieces first. But alongside that, we are working on all of the graphics pieces that will be going along with this program, and also, be reaching out to neighborhoods and talking about this with them. But there will be people who don't appreciate it. From the conversations we've had with other cities, we've talked with Bend and Portland and San Francisco and Salt Lake City. And so we're able to learn from their experience, we are not doing it as an emergency measure. Many cities put these up, in a matter of 4 days or 6 days or something like that. Eugene is taking more of a community engagement approach, but we expect that we'll have just as other cities described, they've described on the whole about, 1/3 who doesn't appreciate it, about 1/3 that says, this is great, but can we do it like this? And 1/3 who says, this is awesome. Can we have it all year? So we're expecting that the reactions are going to be mixed. And as I said, we're going to make available, there's going to be a dedicated phone line and email for this. And we will just be talking to people individually as they call in to hear their concerns. And if there are goal aligned ways that we can make adjustments to that would improve the system, then we would do that. But we're it will be a process for sure. We know that that's going to be an undertaking. All right. Well, I welcome anybody who would like to reach out to me if you have follow-up questions. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Cass. And I think just so everyone knows, I got the video piece figured out, so that should be fixed. Apologies for that. And yeah, if there's any other questions on the open streets pieces, hey, Cass. If there are any other questions, yeah, contact either Cass or I. It's been really wonderful to have Cass taking over this project and really doing a lot as I was working on the Peace Health Rides piece. So yeah, any questions?
Shane, it looks like we're a little ahead on schedule. So I think there's two things we should notice here. One is that there's a guy named Kevin Campbell on my screen. Hi, Kevin. Are you with Springfield BPAC? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
That's right. I'm with BPAC.
Right on. So what have you guys been working on in Springfield?
Well, BPAC hadn't been meeting. We just had our most recent meeting on Tuesday, so we're just kind of getting all back caught up. Let's see here. The biggest things that you guys would want to be aware of would be there's going to be some new signage and a new route on the 5th Street corridor, which is often accessed by people coming into downtown Springfield off the West D bike path system. And it's just going to get people off of West 5th Street, where there have been some conflicts between drivers and bikes particularly. And it's also a bus route, so there's a lot going on there. Bike traffic will be diverted to 4th Street and go past the police station into downtown. Beyond that, we approved our work plans and kind of just normal housekeeping kind of duties at last meeting.
I got some things to add to, if that's what we're interested in talking about right now, Reed.
Yeah, I think we have some time. And then Sam, the second thing would be, this is your last meeting, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about bicycling in the community and then what you've learned during your tenure, I think we've got some time. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I'll start with the VPAC stuff. So another huge thing is we were talking about that horrible junction between the path that goes into Springfield and D Street, and that's like a capital improvement project that's set for this year. And that was the meat of our meeting on Tuesday, was talking about capital improvement projects. Another one that's going to happen this year is the Virginia Daisy Bikeway, which is in further east Springfield over on 54th, which will be really nice because that's going to be a way for people to walk and bike away from Main Street. But I mean, there's so many projects, and yeah, I can send the capital list to the ATC if people think that's helpful, but I'd say the Virginia Daisy as well as the River Path Junction are the biggest.
And then as far as tenure on the ATC goes, I think I have found over time that the public process is like, as much as people know it takes long and it's confusing, it's even more confusing and people are even more frustrated than I could have ever imagined. So I think that's just a testament to like the necessity of a committee such as this to have people listening and responding and contemplating what's the best future that we can have for walking and biking, if that makes sense. That's all I got.
All right, cool. Thanks, Sam.
Hey, Reed, before you walk away from that topic, I just want to note that I sat in on that BPAC meeting on Tuesday because I'm going to be Sam's successor as a liaison to the BPAC. And one thing I found, just like we do, they have 2 subcommittees working on various projects, but unlike us, they have an extremely detailed work plan and set of bullet pointed accountabilities that they've just adopted. And it's such a good example. I think it'd be a great idea to share it with our committee to see how they're doing things.
Let's just see a show of hands. How many people would want to work on a work plan? Anybody? Okay. In the past, this has been a struggle. So some years we try it and some years we don't. But yeah, that's good to know, because I also agree that work plans help us with our agenda setting. It helps us figure out how to spend our time. It helps us figure out who we want to invite to these conversations. I think all of that is valuable, and a work plan can help us with that. Shane, I think we're up to bike share already. Do you want to start?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay.
Okay. So I think most of you know, sort of from In Motion or other news pieces, and now today in the Register Guard, and it's been on other news sites, that we are taking over bike share. It's official, and we are in the process of dealing with that. There's a lot of pieces to make that happen, from contracting with different different contractors to the financial piece. There's a lot of moving parts, and luckily, instead of the June 1st date, we got things from Uber moved to June 30th. And so that gives us enough breathing room that we think we can actually make it all happen. And we've been working with our partners, and the big piece now for me is sort of twofold. That one, we need to make sure that we have some of the money coming in. And so we're trying to make sure that after members get their refunds from Uber, they will need to sign a new agreement, or just click on I agree. And it's basically an agreement to the same things that they did before around liability and those kind of things. But instead of being under Uber, it'll be under the city of Eugene. Once they agree to those items, then all their same information stays in the same servers that it was in before, all that same data. But instead of Uber having that data, it will be in our contractor's hand mobility cloud, and then eventually back into our hands. The good thing about that is that we will have a lot more local control. And so that second part is that we hope to keep that local control by looking for someone locally to run the bike share program. So we're talking to some nonprofits in the next couple weeks as we work to take on over operations and hire some of the Peace Health Right staff to do the operational piece. We also internally as staff will be working on what is that next part. And so it would be good to sort of have some discussion with ATC and sort of your perspective too, and as your advisory to staff, kind of, what are you hearing? What what are your thoughts and sort of input onto this? I can share more about some of the intricacies or questions you have about that handoff that we're doing now and the handoff we hope to do in the future, or just answer sort of what's on your mind, but also gather input about what you're feeling. A big part of when we did the feasibility bike share years ago, and then implementing bike share, the BPAC ATC was active in giving input on what they thought would fit well with the community, and their BPAC members were active in sort of that process. So I want to, this was just a time to engage you with what are your sort of hopes and fears and questions around it. None? Great. All right.
No,
We'll do no.
First of all, I just want to give praise to the city, and particularly, I think, to Reed, because I remember a few years ago, it was consideration about whether to have the outside operator be the owner of the vehicle, of the bicycles, or whether they should be owned by the city. And the decision was that the city should have ownership of the bicycles, so that in case the operator decides to end their contract, that you'd still have the bikes. And here it is, that situation. So that was a real wise decision, and I appreciate the thought that went into that.
Great, and I see, yeah, that's a good point. And Josh, I see you had your hand up.
I have so many questions. I'd be willing to wait at the back of the queue for everybody else. If other people have questions or comments.
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty good on time. Let me just respond to Alan. That was sort of a happy accident, because the operations and business model 5 years ago was completely different than it was a year ago, or that it will be probably 6 months from now. And we just so happened to stumble into sort of a sustainable operations model, so that we have a title sponsor who pays for operations. We own the equipment, so that can't be taken away from us. We've negotiated with Uber so that all the tools and supplies and all of the spare parts and everything that they have are being transferred to us. Shane has worked very diligently with Mobility Cloud that owns all the user data, so that can be transferred. So I think in talking with community partners, and we'll have a more robust conversation with community partners next week about the path forward, whether that's a nonprofit or whether we go out for RFP for a new operator, those sorts of things. But I think what we all feel, and Sam, you work there, but simply talking with staff there, this is probably going to be a better thing for us, because it's going to allow us to do things on a more micro scale than we were able to do with Uber. Uber was pretty challenging to work with, as you might imagine. We weren't able to deploy at little, open houses and things where we would want to be able to do things and provide service. We weren't as nimble as an operation as we wanted to be, just in terms of growth. We're also looking at ways to expand the system. This Mobility Cloud operation, which I mentioned, is working on new microcontrollers that will be compatible with new cellular technology. And so the entire system can be upgraded. And they're also working on a supply chain so that we can get more bikes. There are also some versions of social bikes out there that we have from other systems that have gone under, that are available to us. And so this could be a good thing. One of the things I've challenged Lindsay Hayward with Peace South Rides with, and I would challenge the community with, is if we were to go through something like forming a nonprofit, what should this thing be? Should it be dedicated to bike share? Should it really be an active transportation kind of organization? What is the reach of this, and what should the focus be? And that's one of my concerns with, sort of going with an existing nonprofit in town, is are they really focused or dedicated to the provision of bikes to people and getting more people on more bikes more of the time, the way that a focused nonprofit might be? And so there's a lot to unpack with this, and it's an exciting time to think about it. And as I mentioned, we're doing pretty good on time. So Shane and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because these are the exact conversations that we're having with staff, and Next week, we'll be having it with our partners as well. We'll talk with the university some more. We'll talk with Peace Health. And then we'll reach out to other organizations in town like BEST and some others, maybe the YMCA, and just kind of see what the interest is.
So I see Pete and Kevin. So Josh, if you still want to stay in the back of the queue for a little bit, we'll have Pete go and then Kevin.
Yeah, I just want to read. You talked about having a nonprofit setup. Now I understand that we're kind of doing we're part of this discussion, or at least I look on the agenda and look like we're going to talk about the potential scooter program, which is, if I understand it correctly, is going to have a similar kind of model to this. And you know, are we having a company do that? I mean, I could see in the long term, maybe that this could be, as you say, an active transportation nonprofit that might manage both of those things. I mean, is that a consideration? And it might be able to leverage a whole lot of things together, and keep costs down. I don't know. So, just what are you thinking about that on the long term there?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Hey Shane, is Karen lurking somewhere out there?
Yeah, I was looking. I don't see her on.
Okay.
So we'll
So
cover
Karen
that one.
Mason from our team has been working specifically on scooters and scooter share and the RFP. Next Monday before council, there will be a discussion to change code to allow e-scooters on the shared use pass system. And so we're working toward being able to have a scooter share company in town. I think that's a bit of a competing interest right now, to be quite frank, in that since we own the bikes, the city, it's a public facility, that we need to get this thing stood up and functioning before we worry about bringing scooters into the equation. And there is no such model as cities buying scooters and then having, obviously somebody else could operate a scooter share, but scooter shares are largely a private venture at this point, and a for-profit venture. And so, and maybe that model will change too. We found that it wasn't sustainable for bike share. And so scooters, companies I think are struggling right now too, to figure out what the next big thing is going to be and what's profitable for them. They were so bolstered by venture capital that they sort of forgot about the operations model, because they didn't really have to think about it. They were just trying to dominate, and they did a good job of that for a while, but ultimately it wasn't sustainable for them. And the model that we have here for bike share probably is. And so that's something to consider with scooter share too. And I've made my opinions recognized within the city that, you know, I think let's focus on bike share for now, and then maybe we'll get to scooters when we're more able to handle that as sort of a secondary micromobility device that we have to think about. But we'll see how that goes. And I did forget to check in with Karen to see where we are with that process, but I talked with Rob Innerfeld yesterday about the RFP process, and he's still running that through the management teams at the city to see if we do want that RFP to go out yet this year. So that's what's going on. But I agree with you, Pete. I think if we're going to have an organization in town focused on micromobility options, that should all be under one roof, ideally. Whether or not that's possible, I guess we're yet to see.
I had one quick question, or just a kind of a quick comment. Prior to the kind of changing of hands of this program, BPAC and City of Springfield had expressed interest in trying to collaborate and have bike share locations within City of Springfield. So we would just continue to have interest and would hope that the future plans can be integrated into some sort of eventual plan that incorporates sites in Springfield. And if there's any barriers we should know about, that'd be very, very nice to have that as well.
Yeah, we definitely are interested in talking about that and working with Springfield on that. One of the barriers that we had before was the ability to get bikes. And now with the new model, with the new operator that we're working with, we've regained that ability to get bikes. we have a model that just wasn't in production anymore, but Mobility Cloud, who is contracting for our backend, has gotten those rights back and is in communication with the production facility and is actually taking orders now for those bikes. Some other sort of internal scoop that I think I've only talked to one or two other teammates about. I'm like, Rita, I even told you this in my conversation with Lindsay, that Hamilton bike share was also a bike share that was similar to ours, had the same model bike and same system, operated a little bit differently, but they had a lot more bikes. Well, they were actually shut down on June 1st by Uber, and they weren't able to save their system like we were. And so they're just on hold, trying to get things figured out. And they were doing some cleaning up. And as they cleaned up, they found 28 Peace Health Rides bikes, just the frames and some of the parts. And so he shipped them off to us. And so we have 28 more bikes that we'll need to find parts for, but we have the frames, they're branded and everything. So we do already have, so like the silver linings are just starting to roll in from this. And I think there'll be more. So hopefully we'll be able to do those kinds of expansions that we had hoped to do. But you know, we want to do it as smartly as we can still. But that was some great news. And in talking with Mobility Cloud, just what they're doing with updating the controllers and going into production, they are looking at e-bikes and that potential. They are looking at scooters, but they don't want to get into the scooter business. They're just looking to integrate their sort of back-end operating system into someone else's scooter so that it would mesh with the system. So there's some really great potentials with that. So next, it looked like that was it for Kevin. I saw Dan and then Grace. And if anyone else wants to, I'll note you, Julie, but you can also raise your hand in the little control bar down there, and that way it's easier for me to track. So let's go ahead and Dan, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to, so like, you know, everything I've read about scooter share micromobility, it doesn't seem like it is internally profitable long term to operate these kinds of things. It seems like a lot of the value that's created by shared micromobility goes to the community. And I'm not convinced that things like scooter share and bike share should have to be profitable in and of themselves. And so the more that we can do to you know, have the value captured be the same organization that is operating the thing, the better. And so yeah, having it as a nonprofit is almost certainly going to be that's supported by, you know, tax base or some other system, is most likely going to be more sustainable long term.
Yeah, we definitely recognize that, you know, the current model, not the one we're operating on, but the one that is sort of destroying mini bikes and losing its share, has not proven itself as a sustainable model anywhere really yet. So we're definitely happy with, you know, what our feasibility study showed 5 years ago of, you know, how we should shape our bike share system, and we did that, and it sort of naturally shifted away from that a little bit, but we luckily had some good roots. And so I feel like we're just kind of returning to those good roots and hope we can build it stronger. But yeah, agreed.
There's a good reason it's.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, there's a good reason that cars are so much more profitable to sell than bikes. Bikes are just too cheap, too efficient.
Right, too efficient. All right, Grace.
Yeah, I'm really supportive of the idea of having a single mobility operator that focuses on new mobility. If we are going to have scooters at some point, I think having more of that mobility as a service model where you can have one app and have it be easier for the users and also be supported so that they can kind of support each other rather than competing would be really excellent. And I'm also curious about how to kind of support transit in that, and particularly with LTD having budget cuts and losing point-to-point staff, and, you know, maybe safe routes to school, just how to make it a regional collaboration and integrate all of these pieces that are important. And particularly with transit, with the coronavirus pandemic, you know, it's worrisome moving forward what the future of transit is going to be in all of our communities. And I know that not everybody can use active transportation, and particularly like essential workers and vulnerable communities need transit too. So I'd love to see more ways to kind of integrate those systems and have bike share and scooters be created in a way to support transit as well as an alternative.
So Josh, I had you up next on there, but also Steve.
Julie too.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Thank you. Julie up.
Just a thought about, you know, who runs it. You know, if I put on my nonprofit hat, one of the things you never want to do is start a new nonprofit. You know, it's fairly expensive. It requires, you know, there's a lot that you have to do, and you need a board of directors. And there's sort of quite a bit of competition in this community for boards of directors. We have more nonprofits per capita in Lane County than almost any other place, you know, in the universe. So, you know, yeah, I see the advantage of having them being absolutely dedicated, but having a bigger vision around how bike share fits into the community is also an advantage of using an existing nonprofit. Plus there's the efficiency of, you know, you've already got, you know, you've got a place, you've got infrastructure that exists already, you know, that you're going to be adding onto. Plus nonprofits, the foundations and donors really like to see nonprofits have money generating ventures, and, you know, profitable. They don't need to make huge amounts of money, but they need to, you know, generate a small profit. It's popular in the, you know, so just supporting some of our existing nonprofits in the community is probably an advantage to that, you know, community wise, than starting up a whole nother nonprofit, you know, that has to create all the relationships which an existing nonprofit would already have, you know, with donors and with the community. And so, you know, I know that there's a couple that are interested, and, you know, they both bring interesting pieces to it. So I just, you know, a little caution with starting a new nonprofit. That's it.
Great. All right. Josh, would you like to go ahead and go, or do you want to have Steve? Yeah. Okay.
I'll go ahead. Great. And I'll be concise. So the reason I wanted to not go first is because I have very strong opinions on this, and I really wanted to hear what other people on the committee felt. Julie's comments are very to the point. I think we should start a new nonprofit. I think that we need something that focuses specifically on transportation in the region. There's a great opportunity we have right now. LTD did just shut down their point-to-point program. They fired all their staff, or the majority of their staff, but they still have those programs in their budget, and they have no way to deliver them. So, you know, there are models out there. Commute Options in Eastern Oregon serves this function. It's an independent nonprofit that's majority grant funded from ODOT and others to deliver these programs. They could also be running bike share or scooter share. And so it's something that I think is the only reasonable way forward. Julie's absolutely right that it has huge risks associated with it. But my concern is if you hand this to another nonprofit, they're going to have their own mission, and they're not going to be interested in making bike share succeed. Just to share some stuff from the things I can see with bike share, year over year ridership has been pretty flat. Obviously COVID threw that out the window for the past few months. But before that, we weren't really seeing an expansion in riders, which I attribute to being unable to expand the system. And then from an equity perspective, there's a low income pass. There's been an average of 6 people using it every month. I know we have more than 6 low income people in the service area. And so I blame Uber for that one because I don't think they care about that, even if the local staff do very much. And so I feel it's so important that I'm willing to put my time, effort, and money into making it happen. And so that's what I'm going to be trying and working on the next few weeks. Hopefully the city's open to that. I know it's a huge risk and I know there are big challenges with it, but as long as the city's open to it, I'm willing to put my effort into it. So that's my speech. I did have one question, which was, where's the funding source coming from for the city to handle operations in the meantime?
So there's a couple areas where the money's coming from. So currently everything is paid up through the end of June. So starting July 1st, we will need to start covering all the pieces of the back end operations and the customer service that we pay a contractor for, the lease of the van, the lease of the office space, all of those pieces. And so we are working with Peace Health, who is the title sponsor. They are working to recover their money from Uber because they did pay their sponsorship for the year right as Uber made the decision to shut down. But they have been very supportive and they are open to helping to fund the system even before they settle things with Uber. But we're not sure to what extent, if they will be able to pay the full monthly sort of piece that they were paying before, though they paid it at the beginning of the year. And then we also have income from memberships. And so right now that's set up to an Uber account. And so we're working to shift that over to a City of Eugene account where all these funds will come out of. And then the city does have a little bit of money for bike share that we were actually paying for City of Eugene employees that came from our risk and wellness funds, so that our employees had free memberships so that they could use bikes to be healthy and active. And so some of those funds can, we had also paid Uber, but luckily they hadn't cashed the check. And so we stopped payment on the check and we have those funds back again. So we have a little bit of a window there to help cover some of that. So we are still working with our legal team to determine how much we'll be able to get from Uber as they shut down and whether there's going to be any legal action afterwards or not, sort of depending on how that all goes. That's in our legal team's hands working with Uber. Okay, then Steve.
Yeah, it's pretty much been covered, but I just want to voice some strong support for a few things that have been said. I think Josh is so right, and Julie, that I think if we bring in another for-profit operator that fails in a short period, that's probably, a death knell for this program. That would probably be fatal to the long-term viability. And if there is a reasonable candidate, I think a nonprofit approach is great. The other thing, like Grace, a few months ago, maybe I would have been a big advocate for sort of a comprehensive approach, but things change. Reality has changed quite a bit in the last couple of months. And I agree with Reed that whereas I'm really a strong scooter supporter and would love to see everything integrated with transit at the moment, to me, bike share is the most important thing. And let's not let, the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's keep the patient alive long enough to let it, grow extra arms.
Agreed. Okay, Alan?
So it sounds like there's no threat of services being interrupted as a result of this transition to the city, and that at least there's no hard deadline that this city is under to stop operations. So there'll be continual service. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah, we are planning to continue operations until we find a new operator.
Okay.
Yeah, and the break-in service that was going to happen, we were able to make, fix that, and we're not going to have any break-in service. There could be a little blip sort of in the refund, city takes over, sort of people might see a little bit, but we have a customer service team that's there and should be able to solve any problems that people have if we can get everything right. It's the same back-end operator. Mobility Cloud was doing this work for Uber, so it should be pretty seamless. They just have to make sure that everything is lined up and all the name servers are talking to the right providers, and all the back-end data stuff needs to be lined up. But if that transfer happens, we're aiming to do that transfer by the 22nd, so that if there is a blip or something, we sort of have a little fudge time with the to the 30th. So hopefully people will not notice any difference. They'll agree to one transfer piece, and it should be pretty seamless.
Okay. And is there a time frame for determining a new operator?
We don't have an official time frame yet. That should be decided in the next couple of weeks, what our timeline looks like. Our risk department said that they would like us to find someone else as soon as we can, so that we have an umbrella policy that should cover this. But if it were to go on for much longer than a few months, or if we started seeing crashes and people suing the city, they would definitely want us to change our policy or add a rider onto it to give us a little more coverage or something like that. But so that's the one area where we do have a little bit of a okay, let's, we need to get this on to someone else's, coverage. And I think Peace Health is open to us running it in that time, but I think they would also like to have a stable partner to be working with as well.
Okay, thanks.
And then let's see, Sam.
Yeah, I wanted to express a hesitancy towards just a blanket expansion of the system. I am pretty concerned with the long-term funding and the long-term operation of the system. And one fear that I have is that being like, oh, now that we don't have like the shackles of Uber, we can go to other places. I think that we want to think about how that's going to impact like the quality of the service. I think right now the Peace Health system runs pretty much perfectly. Whenever you get on a bike, you can expect it to work really well. And I think that we can afford to maybe have like a little bit of a drop in reliability for like an increase in the coverage area. But I think that that's something to think about, because I don't personally think that if we expand the coverage area, we're going to continue to get more and more ridership. I think that we'll probably like tap into more users, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to increase our ridership. So that's my hesitancy, is that an increase in coverage is going to put a strain on the system. But yeah.
Great, thanks. All right, other comments, questions, thoughts? So we're good. We have about 8 more minutes on this topic. I don't know if Reed wants to say some more. I guess I'll just sort of, in response, I don't think there were any other questions that were left open, but maybe just to the piece between Josh and Julie, I think that that's one of the things over the next couple of weeks around considering nonprofits. And, we've been approached by for-profit and local businesses that are interested as well. I think all of those, we're definitely interested in hearing the community's input and your all's input. And I think we're pretty open. I definitely, just from my background of working with nonprofits, from serving on boards to being employed at nonprofits, working as an advocate, working within government agencies, working for profit businesses as well, I definitely am, lean in that direction as far as who I think could manage a bike share program well. Whether that's something that is started up. I mean, I've been involved in starting a few nonprofits, and it is a big task. And those nonprofits were started because there wasn't something that was doing what that nonprofit was doing. I think bike share could potentially fit into some of what some nonprofits are doing, but there's certainly no one that is doing a bike share or, really transportation, service nonprofit like Commute Options or those kinds of things. But there are, I think, nonprofits that are doing work that certainly this could fall in the umbrella, because I've also worked with nonprofits who are sort of supportive of other smaller nonprofits or what could be a nonprofit organization, but operates under the umbrella of a larger nonprofit so that they don't have to go through the whole, hassle of having a board and just the procedures that are required for that. So, but I think as the city, we're very open to seeing what is best for bike share. We obviously want to see it succeed. That's why we made sure there was no gap in service. We are invested in these bikes and in the system. So, that's why we want to hear from the community, what they think is important, because this is the community's bike share. So definitely appreciate people's input on what they would like to see in their experiences. Grace.
Yeah, I just think that given the opportunity for community members to participate in making this happen, there are a lot of people that would readily step and rise to that occasion. Even just thinking from my experience on campus as a student, I think since bike share is such a solid, tangible thing that so many people love and use, I think it would be a very small ask for a lot of people to want to be on the board or get involved in some way. So I think if someone is willing to kind of take the torch and lead it and create roles for others to get involved, I don't see there being a problem with getting enough support for that to happen personally.
Great. Any other ATC members or Reed?
Hi, Shane. I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay, Marina. So we're on the bike. We're talking about the bike share and sort of the transition that's happening. So do you have anything that you wanted to input? I don't know if you know where things are, but if you have any input on bike share, and we do have a couple more minutes on this before we need to move on to the next topic.
No, not for the moment.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay. Well, great. Yeah, I think it's exciting times. We will keep you posted. There's definitely a lot that will happen probably even by the next meeting. So we'll try and keep you in the loop as much as we can. And if you have any questions, I know that Josh and I will certainly be talking and anyone else that is interested, feel free to send a note to Reed and I with your thoughts and questions. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, and that is MPO grants update. Reed. Oh, you're on mute, and then you probably want to share your screen. You see this share the screen button there. There you go. So your screen's on, Reed, but we can't hear you quite yet. So if you want to.
Are you seeing a Google map?
Yep.
Cool. So we applied for 8 different projects through the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization. I think we touched on those last time. I just wanted to put a map to those so that you could see where some of these infrastructure projects were. I will also say that, Shane, you've got a couple minutes to think about how you want to talk about smart trips, which I don't have included in this. And then also we have a Vision Zero analysis where we've applied for some funding, and neither of those show up on my map. But I do have 6 different locations, and I just want to talk briefly about those and then see if I can provide any clarity about what these are. So the first one, and this is a big black screen. Let's see. Come on, technology. All right, let's try this differently. I will just try, I'll just zoom around. Maybe this will work. So this first project, as many of you know, we're trying to build. We are in the process of building, potentially. We're in the design process of building a 2-way protected bike lane on 8th Avenue. Sorry, not a 2-way protected, but a protected bike lane. 1 bike lane going eastbound and 1 bike lane going westbound on 8th Avenue between Lincoln Street and Mill Street. This is part of the town square development, as well as a pavement project where we were going to replace the pavement anyway. The transportation system plan says let's put some protected bike lanes in there. This would be a really good addition because it connects downtown directly to the riverbank path by 8th Avenue. There's just that little gap over here in the courthouse district where there's sort of a choose your own adventure right now, some wide sidewalks as well as some shared streets. But what we decided was when we put all the estimates together and got the first round of funding and then added in all of the money that we got from Town Square and from everything else, we were about $800,000 short on this project. So we applied for an additional $800,000 of funding. So we applied for that. And then if you go north a little bit, so if you take that down to Coburg Road and go over the Ferry Street Bridge, you end up going through a series of intersections that don't work so great. And one of the reasons they don't work so great is because traffic is coming in from every different direction. And we have to separately signalize these directions so that they don't conflict with each other. And that just takes a lot of time, and time is delay. So it can take a long time to get through these intersections. We started thinking about doing roundabouts at some of these, which would allow traffic to continue to flow. And if we can run bikes and pads around the outside of that, potentially that would help everybody move a little bit safer in just to stop those delays overall. So we applied for this one over here at Coburg at Oakway. There's a number of different legs that come into this intersection. And I think one of the benefits of doing it here is that there's an awful lot of room here. There's an awful lot of travel lanes that could be repurposed for something else. And one of those something else's is another grant that we applied for, and that's specifically a 2-way, or sorry, I keep saying 2-way, a protected bike lane on Oakway from this intersection. So if you've ever gone on the path and then you wanted to go north on Oakway, there's this weird sort of transition you have to do across Coburg Road, and then to kind of get going north on Oakway. This roundabout will allow us to remove one of those travel lanes on Oakway. That gives us enough space to protect bike lanes on both sides of Oakway. And then as you go north on Oakway, there's some on-street parking that could also be repurposed for protected bike lanes. So the idea is that we could get those 2 projects done at once and provide a little bit more safety and a little bit more protection within the system. So that's another project. Again, that one's in the TSP. That would connect all the way up to Cal Young. And then I think I'm across the river here. So for those of you who have met Andy Kading, he's our traffic operations engineer. He was fresh out of graduate school a couple years ago and learned all about roundabouts. So our new technology for everything, safety, mobility, access seems to be roundabouts. In this application, it makes an awful lot of sense also. because what you have, and this is Fred Meyer here, this is just north of the Beltline interchange at River Road, is that these are not signalized, these driveways. And so we have a lot of crash events that happen here. I think mostly from people who are trying to turn left and then have to go across 2 lanes of traffic, plus a 2-way left turn lane, and then move into one of 2 travel lanes. And folks are coming around Division Avenue carrying 40, 45 miles an hour of speed. And so when crashes do happen here, the injury severity is unfortunately quite high. So we applied for a suite of safety improvements on this corridor from River Road down to this bend to keep people from speeding around that bend. Hopefully that also includes protected bike lanes. We have room to do that because there's more lanes there than we would need. Most of the time when you see a lot of lanes happening near an intersection, it means that we have a lot of storage there, and that storage is for cars waiting for a green light. If there isn't a green light there, in other words, if we have a roundabout instead, then we can take that space and use it for other things like trees or planter strips or stormwater or bike facilities. And so there's a lot of opportunity on this one, and I'm pretty excited about it. This is directly as a result of our Vision Zero analysis. As I mentioned, that's another plan that we've applied for. It doesn't show up on my map, but this is how we identify these types of intersections and these types of projects, is that we notice that a lot of crashes happen at a few locations, and there are 28 different intersections in Eugene where things are going badly. And so part of that plan is to figure out what sort of interventions are most appropriate at those 28 different locations. You end up hiring a consultant, they run some models, they look at some different interventions, and we have basically a framework or a blueprint for what we should be applying for in future rounds of funding, or as funding becomes available through, say, a pavement bond measure, what sort of intersection changes should we be making in the future? So that's also a good grant and one that we went after. Another one is, this is the West Bank path as it comes just north of Division Avenue and then ends right here at Beaver. We want to extend this path to the north and all the way up to this street, which is called Admiral Street. Admiral Street connects directly into Wilkes. And then just north of Wilkes is Madison Middle School. And this whole big area just to the east of Madison Middle School is going to be a new community park that the city is currently designing. It's going to be ball fields, play space. There may be a community center here, but this is going to be a huge community attractor. And so being able to get people who want to walk and bike to this space via shared use path, I think is going to be critical to the success of this park, or at least how people attempt to travel to that park. These are some local roads in here, and I think there's some additional stuff that we can do to make this network a little bit more comfortable. But the trick is going through this undeveloped space, and we've already had conversations with this mining corporation, this gravel company, about doing some land swaps and getting some space to do that. So that's another project that hopefully gets funded. And then lastly, Beaver Huntsicker as a corridor is owned and maintained by Lane County. Lane County got some money through the MPO to do some improvements. They were going to do a temporary sidewalk on the south side, as well as a temporary path from the West Bank path, and then one temporary crossing. We've asked them to give us all of that money, as well as their design money, and then we're going to apply for some additional infrastructure money so that we can design the whole thing at once. And what that'll allow us to do is to put all the bike lanes and all the sidewalks in at the same time that will connect directly to that shared use path. Lane County has already postponed the temporary improvements that they were going to make to this based on a variety of COVID-related decisions and just staffing issues that they were having problems with. And so this wasn't going to happen this year anyway. We are going to try to get that temporary sidewalk in as soon as possible. It sounds like Lane County can deliver that next year, but then we'll start the robust design process to fix Beaver and Huntsicker and make that a complete street so that it works better for everybody. So with those 6 projects, there's the 8th Avenue and just some additional funding for that, because that's a pretty big lift for our regular funding. Coburg Road roundabout, Oakway protected bike lane that spins out of that, the Division Avenue safety improvements, the West Bank path extension, and then Hunsaker improvements are all of the infrastructure grants that we applied for. There's a little bit of alchemy that occurs as we're trying to figure out, because LTD is also applying for funding, and Springfield's applying for funding, and Lane County's applying for funding, and Eugene's applying for funding. We try to get about 40% of that funding right off the top, because we've got about 40% of the population within the region. And with the asks that we've submitted, we're very close to that. We're at about 42%. And that's with some adjustments. But ATC doesn't have to make a motion on this. This has already been submitted to the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and they are going to consider all of these grant projects at their next meeting, whenever that is. They haven't decided if they're going to meet in July or not, but if they don't, they will meet in August. So either in July or August, the MPC will be voting on this, and we'll know for sure what projects have funding. Shane, what's going on with Smart Trips?
All right, so the Smart Trips project that we applied for in this round of funding is different from some of the Smart Trips projects that we've done in the past, which have all been focused on neighborhoods. And so this new Smart Trips program that we're going to do is called the New Movers. And New Movers program will focus on people who are moving either into Eugene or even within Eugene. So if you're moving from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, often if you've done a move recently, you know you get all those junk mail pieces from different home improvement stores and the like. Well, we are going to tap into some of those same lists and send you non-junk mail, but really interesting transportation information. And so we'd send surveys out and then send information and order forms similar to the way our Smart Trips has worked in the past, finding out what information you want to find out about walking, biking, taking transit in your area. These programs have been implemented in other places, and we're going to follow a lot of similar models to what they've done. And the idea is just that when you make a move like this, you are much more likely to change behaviors because you're making some major change in your life already. And so behavior change models have shown us that when you do a move like that, you're more likely to change a behavior such as exercise or transportation or those life altering changes that are sometimes hard to do unless you have sort of that marker. And so this is a great time to tell people who are new to a neighborhood about that neighborhood. So we have some really good information from our previous Smart Trips programs that we can sort of put together into these neighborhood packets again and have them ready that when we go out and deliver, it's just instead of being in one neighborhood, we're going to be focused in a large area. And so we may split the city in two. We sort of have some logistical pieces to figure out, but it would be a very similar model where people would order things, we would deliver them, we would engage them in different events. And so there's some fine tuning that can still be done, just like the designs have to be done for the infrastructure project. The designs still have to be done for the final program layout, but that's the idea with what the Smart Trips program will look like with this funding. So. And then Reed, I don't know if the other piece, Vision Zero, I think you touched on that. And that's just looking at all of our Vision Zero intersections, or at least as much as we can with the amount of funding that we receive, and coming up with potential design solutions that are ready for when we have the money to implement those, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay, looks like Alan has his hand up. So if anyone else has a question, just throw your hand up marker down there and that'll help us. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay. I have two questions. One for Reed regarding the MPO grants. Is there any kind of prioritization that the city submitted those grant requests? Or are they just all together?
Like, are those projects, this is our highest priority and this is our lowest priority to get done?
We get into that's the alchemy I talked about. And so there is some, what Rob likes to call horse trading, that happens as we go through the list and figure out what can be funded and what can't. The staff committee to the MPO started on this a couple months ago and developed a straw poll and said, okay, here's all the projects we think we can do. And at that point, we negotiated. And so the projects I just talked about are all the projects we expect to get.
I see.
And then we did that specifically to a dollar value that we thought was fair. And we made a little bit of change to some of those cost estimates where we might have to find some additional funding, but we're going to get most of that funding from hopefully this round of MPO funds. So the prioritization of our projects is that list. That whole list is what we expect to get.
Okay. Okay. And then Shane, I had a question for you. Have you considered the possibility of a neighborhood ambassador program for people who are moving to a neighborhood?
Well, we have talked about having transportation ambassadors in the past to guide people on sort of walking, biking, transit, excursions, and to sort of help people out to try new transportation options. But you mean neighborhood specific, like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood, here's.
Yeah. I think that could be a really successful program, not only to receive written materials, but perhaps someone to say, hey, I live nearby and I could show you how to get to the places you want to go and show you this, the sneaky route behind the grocery store or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. That could tie in with some of the things we were thinking about with this other piece. So, yeah.
I'd be an ambassador.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that much like finding the ATC membership from other neighborhoods, that would be the key piece is like, do we have the representation where we don't have the ridership, and like, that's where we sort of want it the most, right? Is you want to have, those people who know that area because there aren't that many people in that area and you want to get them experiencing it. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Any other questions? Thoughts on the MPO funding? Okay. Read, any final thoughts before we move on? No. All right, so project updates. This is probably mostly you right now. Again, Reed, if you have anything else, but I can also touch on any other things that we might want to talk about.
So 13th Avenue, they have switched sides. So they were working on that south side and doing all of the ramps and parking bays. And now they're on the north side. That is a big deal because the north side is where the bikeway goes. And so we're getting closer to being able to have that open. The contractor is currently about 2 weeks ahead of schedule. So we're doing really good on that. It should be open in October. It might even be September. So before students even get here, potentially we'll have this thing open, and that has always been the goal. And so far it looks like we're achieving that. Just an update on the West Bank path. As you know, the ATC decided to give about half of the bike ped PBM money, pavement bond measure money, to shared use path infrastructure, and specifically to maintenance of the path system. And we selected the West Bank path as the first segment that would undergo an overhaul. The Parks Bond also has some money to supply lighting on the path network. And so we started with the West Bank path and we installed lighting. There's a land use process that goes with that because it's within the Willamette Greenway corridor. And although the planning director decided to add lighting to the West Bank path, that decision has been appealed by the public. And it sounds like that is going to an appeals hearing on July 1st. So on July 1st, there will be an appeals hearing to basically determine if the city upheld its standards in saying that it was okay to install lighting within this corridor. And we'll see what the impact of that is. you know, it's interesting that when you talk to neighborhood associations or as the River Road Santa Clara neighborhoods have been assembling their neighborhood plan, they talk a lot about lighting and safety improvements. And sometimes, and this is maybe me being frustrated, we cobble together all the money to do that and then do all the design work, and then folks show up and say, let's not do that. Kind of late in the process for that, but it's certainly their right to do that, and we'll see how it goes. I'm hopeful that we'll get some lighting on the West Bank path, but we'll see how that goes, as I say. South Bank path is another one that we're trying to get done. This one goes right through the University of Oregon in the North Campus section. We found a lot of ephemeral pools that have started to develop there since that area was sort of flattened. And so now we have to go around all of those pools. So what was going to be a very straight line in that path has become a little curvier. And I think that's just going to be the nature of that path. But that's one where it's on private property. It's on, well, semi-private, public. It's on the university land. And we'll use the university lighting standards on that. So it'll very much feel like campus. And that one's on schedule too. So hopefully we can get that one going this year as well. The Safe Routes to School projects have been bid, and we've gotten a schedule for those, and those will start momentarily. Those include projects like Shane's favorite crossing of Willamette Street down at 34th Avenue at Village School. We'll get an RFB down there. There will also be some sidewalk infill, like on Terry Street between Royal and Calapooya High School. There's currently no sidewalk on the west side, and there's a very well-worn Desire line in there. We've got some projects like that. Another one on North Danabo, where we'll do some sidewalk infilling so that kids don't feel like they have to walk in the street, or so that they're at least being somewhat protected as they do travel. And that just started, so that's good. I had some concerns when COVID first started happening that we would end up delaying some of the bike ped projects, which for some reason always seem to be the most severable of all of our infrastructure projects. Not this year. So we're moving ahead with Safe Routes. We're moving ahead with the shared use paths. We're moving ahead with 13th Avenue. We're moving ahead with design on 8th Avenue. Northeast Livable Streets is another neighborhood greenway project that I've talked about quite a bit. It's akin to the Daisy project in Springfield, in that it develops a neighborhood greenway system, primarily in Northeast Eugene, by putting some enhanced crossings across those arterial streets. And so that one is like this close to being bid. We just have to apply a little, or we just have to get a little bit of right of way before we bid that, so that we don't have to deal with that as part of the bid process. So we're working on that. And so that one's almost ready to bid as well. What am I forgetting, Shane? I mean, there's a lot of projects.
So just real quick, I don't know if you all saw that, what I put up before on the screen. Let's see, sorry. But that was just a quick little shot of the, oops. Oh, I lost it, never mind. That was a little shot of the Safe Routes to School project. Highway 99, Reed was one. This is our internal list here, and you can see projects that are in construction and in the bid process, and then ones that are in the design process. So we have a lot of projects sort of in the queue, and we're trying to keep track of those. And we are trying, Kelsey is working on a way to have a more robust sort of communication piece with people on, what projects are where, and working with our, it's been great to have her working with our engineering team on more of the implementation pieces and sort of what they're sharing and what we're sharing. But yeah, so Highway 99, you want to mention that one, Reed?
That should almost, wait, which part of, so there's a lot of stuff happening.
The path.
Yeah, Roosevelt path extension. So on the north side of Roosevelt Boulevard, starting at Maple Street, there's a path that goes out to Beltline and then goes all the way over to North Danabo. There was about a quarter-mile gap between Maple Street and Highway 99, where we have that path that goes adjacent to Highway 99 on the west side and then goes over the railroad tracks. where we have that bike ped bridge. And so that may be done right now, actually. I was out there 2 weeks ago. The first section was completely done. The second section was poured and people were on it and moving around orange cones, even though they should not have been doing that. But I think we're very close to being able to open that up. So keep your eyes on In Motion and the city's Instagram. We'll have some pictures of that one up soon. That's a really good connection. And we also did a safety improvement up there. There was a weird thing going on. Shane, if you want to work your magic maps, there was at Roosevelt at 99, we had some flexible delineators and a green bike lane and all sorts of weird stuff happening, so that folks coming off of Roosevelt Boulevard and turning north onto Maple Street knew that there was basically a shared use path in the way. And we're taking all of that out because we reduced the travel lanes from 2 to 1. So if you're in that northernmost travel lane, your only option is to turn right, and you're going to have to reestablish yourself in a right turn only lane, because we're going to neck down the highway or Roosevelt just prior to this intersection. So Shane, to the left of your screen, you can see the green thing going on. Maple Street, right there.
Right here.
So there was a bunch of geometrical design and gymnastics going on here to try to make this as safe as we could. I don't think we were ever really successful at it, but you can see there's a through lane, there's a right turn only lane, and there's a left turn only lane here. We necked that down. So basically just to the east of here, there's going to be one travel lane, and we're going to introduce those turn lanes separately so that people don't carry speed. And it's one lane to the west of Maple Street, you'll see. So people were jockeying for position to try to get to that lane ahead of other people. They're not going to be able to do that anymore because there's only one lane. We moved the whole curb to the south and took out one of those travel lanes. So hopefully this is much improved. Hopeful that this will work a lot better and more people will be encouraged to try this out. A lot of the community doesn't even know there's a shared use path. But there is, and it works great. So test it out. There's some other stuff going on in Highway 99 way up on the north end. We've just started looking at design for the Maxwell Street Bridge. The Maxwell Street Bridge is the only connection across the railroad between Roosevelt Boulevard and then I think Irvington. And so that's 2 miles of nothing across the railroad on the south side and 1 mile of nothing to the north side. So that Maxwell connection is really critical for active transportation. And right now there's not a sidewalk that connects down to the Highway 99 corridor. So we've got some money to start the design to make sure that the sidewalk that's on the south side of the bridge can go all the way to Prairie Street, and then Prairie will go all the way to 99, and then 99 will go all the way to Barger. And we got most of that money as part of a jurisdictional transfer with ODOT, which means that Highway 99 right here, all of Highway 99 through the city of Eugene is now the city of Eugene's property. And what that means is we get to do more interventions on this highway system than we otherwise were able to do in the past. That includes things like at that Roosevelt path where we were just talking about, there's a slip lane there. We elevated the entire crosswalk in the slip lane. ODOT wouldn't have let us do that, but since we took jurisdictional control of that, we were able to do that. So now that path hopefully will function a little bit better. So these changes are coming along. They're occurring incrementally, but it's exciting because all of these projects that I've known about forever are finally going. We're finally getting some drawings back, and we're finally able to start talking about some timelines. So
Reed, I'll also mention Garden Ave, Moss, Villard, Walnut, they're out to bid, right?
they have been bid. And so I don't have a timeline on those yet, but so Garden Avenue, which is the South Bank, you end up, running out of South Bank Path, and then you end up going by just where north of where the new night campus is going to be and going down through the Riverfront Research Park, and then onto Garden. And Garden is going to get traffic calming. It's going to get curb extensions. It's going to get a little bit of sidewalk improvement and some shared lane markings. And we're going to improve the overhead lighting there too. So that connection on the South Bank path is going to get much improved. And over the next few months, hopefully, I think construction is just about ready to go on that one.
Great. So let's see. Full get into, let's see, so we still have a little bit of time for project updates. So let me just see if there's anything else that pops into our head here or looking at my list. I guess any questions? Does anyone have any questions on those existing projects or things that you might have missed that you might have heard about before? Oh, Reed, do you want to mention something about the enhanced walking network? I saw something come through on that. I'm not exactly sure where.
We just got 60% drawings. It's a dispersed project where we're doing sidewalk infill and enhanced pedestrian crossings at probably a dozen different locations throughout the city. So I'll probably come back to talk about that one. I haven't gone through the 60% drawings yet, but I think there's going to be some decisions we'll have to make about that. So I do plan on bringing that back to ATC and talking it over.
Alan.
Oh, yeah, what's the status of Willamette Street between 19th and 20th and all those decisions that are in process?
Well, and also just there's the whole repaving project as well. And I don't know if Reed, you have a update on that South Willamette.
Well, I just updated the Monday sheet that you had.
Oh, you did? Great.
I talked to Brian Root about it and I can't remember. I think we're ready to go on that one. The South Willamette paving project.
Oh, so it's in the bid process.
Okay. No, it's been through bid. We had an issue with anyway, it's very close to starting. It's like very close. Ellen, were you talking about the north end of Willamette Street or the south end?
I was talking about the north end, but actually I'm curious about both. So
yeah,
thanks.
So the north end of Willamette Street between 20th and 18th, which is currently a one-way street southbound, is going to be converted to two-way. So you'll be able to continue going north on Willamette Street from city limit to all the way into downtown. And I just spoke with the project manager today. We have a preliminary design on that. We hired a signal consultant for 18th at Willamette. And then we're sort of working backwards from the intersection to figure out what the striping will be. So that's coming right along. So that one's on schedule. We're going to try to bid that one as soon as possible and hopefully start construction this calendar year. So hopefully that's all buttoned up in 2020. That's our goal.
And just to be clear that the designs that we're looking at right now do include bike lanes for north and south.
Yep.
On that.
And semi-protected intersections. That's a design detail we're working through.
Okay. Any other questions, final pieces? Grace?
It just occurred to me, I'm not sure if anyone knows the answer to this yet, but is there any kind of changes that you see in terms of funding for the next couple of years due to coronavirus or the next round of MPO funding after this one for transportation projects and active transportation?
We're waiting for the other shoe to drop on that one. Fortunately, a lot of the work that we're doing right now, almost all the bike ped projects I just mentioned are grant funding. We're going after more grants. The money that we went after is available. And so we should be okay in terms of that pipeline and continuing to move forward on those projects. And a lot of the pavement projects we do are local property tax. It's all through the pavement bond measure. So we're staffed up primarily through the PBM. And so there won't be any immediate things that I think you'll notice in terms of what we're doing. There are some discretionary projects where we do like what we call a slurry seal on some of the local streets. Those sorts of things are funded through gas tax, which has been impacted by COVID. And we just don't know what that impact is yet. So we know there's going to be something. We know there's going to be less money down the road. We don't know what that means for programming and or for staff yet. The entire transportation planning team is basically funded by the gas tax. So we'll have to see how this shakes out. And at this point, we don't know.
Yeah, and that there is definitely something that, that's worth watching at the federal level, that there's been talk of, the next big stimulus package and whether that was going to include infrastructure. And so that's something definitely to keep your eyes on. I know that, with DeFazio there, that there's definitely something that, advocates are watching there. So if you're interested in that, definitely engage with that piece. All right. Well then, let's see. Seeing no other questions. Information share. You want to raise your hand. That might be the easiest way. And then if you have something to share, any items, please raise your hand, and Josh, will start off with you.
The University of Oregon is filling out our bicycle-friendly university application for renewal. We're currently gold. We expect to be gold again, but hopefully we'll get some of that feedback then could put us on the path to platinum. We have a new director of transportation services since the last time we filled out the application. And so I think there's a lot more interest in being more bike friendly at the university. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. And then I did want to advocate for restarting the subcommittees. I think there's a lot of us who would be very happy to pitch in if the city has work that wants to be done. So.
Great. Yes, I would definitely, I think that that's worth doing, and I'm happy to work with the program subcommittee to get that subcommittee rolling again. I don't know if Reed, if you've been meeting at all with the infrastructure, but yeah, I think with the coronavirus and then self-rides piece, I know I have not picked up that ball, so thanks for that reminder and nudge to do that. Other information share? Marina?
Yeah, it's not an information to share, but I just want to comment that on South Willamette, between 19 and 22nd Street, if you're going south, there is that slope. There are too much of the blackberries coming into the bicycle lane is forcing the bicyclists to get too close to the traffic lanes. That needs to be trimmed. And the
anytime you see that, you can take out your iBike Huge app and log that, or you can call 682-4800 and tell them to get out there and mow the right of way, because that's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the number, please?
682-4800.
And that 682-4800 number is great for any issues. It's sometimes called the pothole number, but you see any signs, debris, anything, that will work. Same as the WeBike Eugene app. Sorry, iBike Eugene, no, WeBike Eugene app, if you want to put that one in.
Thank you.
So I will also note, just really quick, because we have the time. So People for Bikes, and since Josh mentioned the League of American Bicyclists, People for Bikes came out with their ranking system, and you might be hearing about that one. Last year we were ranked 5th when those rankings came out, and this year we were ranked 38th. I think there's something wrong with their matrix system. We worked actually really hard on getting some of that data updated. Some of their numbers come from the bicycle network analysis, the BNA that they do, and they were missing some pieces of what our system looked like. We filled in those gaps. That score rose a little bit, but our overall score fell. And so I have a call in to them already to be like, hey, what's up? We're definitely not a worse city for biking than Hillsborough. So just in case you see that come across, I think that they have some flaws in their system, but they've been decent to work with in the past, so I'm interested to see what they say about why the shifts that have happened. Because I think some other cities, it sounded like, also dropped way down from where they were last year, and the cities that rose up are kind of strange. So it'll be interesting to see what they say about their data. Reed?
Yeah, I'll go. So today I submitted a few letters of interest to ODOT. The Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Program is taking applications again in August, but you basically have to pre-qualify with a letter of interest. So I submitted two. One of those is a sidewalk on Howard Avenue between River Road and basically Kelly Middle School or Howard Elementary. And then the other one is just doing some spot improvements in the Bethel School District where we have some pedestrian crossings of arterial streets, but we need to upgrade them with things like rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So I submitted both of those. And as I was talking with Lane County about them, because Howard Avenue is not our street, so we'll have to figure that one out later. They also submitted two. And so hopefully there'll be some good news after August, talking about safe routes to school and some additional money that might be coming our way.
All right. Any other information share? Final questions? No? Great. Well, then we can wrap up a little bit early.
Did we decide if we're going to do July?
Oh, that's a good question.
So in the past, we have skipped July because of Oregon Country Fair and just a lot of activity going on in July. That is not the case this year necessarily. And so if people think that they will show up to this platform in July, we could definitely have another ATC meeting. But I just wanted to test that. Maybe we do a show of hands to see if people think they can be here. I don't have a calendar in front of me during the next date.
Have that. That would be July 9th. So after July 4th weekend. So
July
yeah,
9th,
raise your hand.
Maybe. Okay.
Sam won't be, Nick won't be. We might have enough for a quorum. So we'll do that.
But we'll take a look at that, and then I'll talk with Shane about how to do something similar to this for the subcommittee for infrastructure. Although I think I can probably do that on Teams, or how many people can I invite to Teams? Do you know?
Yeah, you can invite as many people as you want on Teams, and
Okay.
since it's a subcommittee meeting, you can do that on Teams.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be easier.
Should be able to work through that.
Yeah. Great. All right. Any final pieces?
I just wanted to thank Sam for his years on the committee. I think he's
contributed
a whole lot. So, I hope your journeys are fruitful and come by.
Yeah, and Sam,
back
and
into
Sam,
town.
I know Lee usually has a little sort of going away for people who have been on the committee for a while. And so maybe he can figure out a way to get something to you, but yeah, we definitely appreciate having you on here and all the work you've done internally and externally in the community, and around, bike share and the bike program and just all the different areas that you've been involved. We definitely appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really nice to be part of this committee.
All right. Great. Well, thanks everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Bye.